By now, you've probably seen this. Yeah, I find this interesting because it really shows how misunderstood mental health still is to the public. Until I was about 18, I never understood why I felt scared to talk to people, or why I felt so isolated because I had no courage to talk to anyone. For most of my life, people had prescribed the shyness label to me, and I had no idea that that shyness was developing into social anxiety. Until I started seeing a therapist, I had no idea how to explain how I felt or give a name to it. Ever since I found out that I have social anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, I have wished for some sort of representation in media. I'm studying to be a screenwriter, and representation in media is especially important to me because of this. I want the things I make and the things I consume to reflect lessons and teach people about other people, cultures, and places. I want people to see themselves in the characters and situations I write, and hopefully help them to understand themselves and others a little better. The first time I saw the anxiety attack scene in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I cried. I vividly remember feeling extremely emotional, not just because of the emotional content of the scene, but because that was the first time I'd ever seen an anxiety attack portrayed in media, as far as I could remember. The fact that it was being portrayed through a character from my childhood hit especially hard as well. For the first time, I felt truly seen by that scene, and even more motivated to one day showcase that kind of representation on screen through the stuff I create. Stuff like this shows that the general public has already grown tired of anxiety representation on screen. I've never seen such scenes in media, especially not children's media, so this has been quite an emotional and exciting time in media for me. But the general public doesn't understand the wishes that people with mental health issues have for others to understand us. I struggled for years because I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling to anyone. But once I learned what it was and how to articulate its meaning to others, I felt a little more understood by the people close to me. I have yearned for this kind of representation. Teaching kids early how to deal with anxiety is important. I know scenes like these ones would have been incredibly impactful to me when I was younger, especially Inside Out 2. They excelled wonderfully at explaining anxiety and how to cope with it. I don't think these kinds of scenes need to slow down. This is the bare minimum at this time, and it only needs to ramp up in my opinion. But I feel like media is going in the right direction with this for the most part. I want to touch on some of my favorite animated programs that have explored anxiety recently and in the past. Whether it's one scene or an overarching plotline, I'll be touching on 3 shows today. The first is LEGO Ninjago Dragons Rising. Ninjago is one of my favorite shows of all time, and the spin-off show is right up there as well. The spin-off focuses on the core group of Lloyd, Eren, Sora, and Ryu. It also features the other original ninja, Cole, Kai, Nia, Zane, and Jay, as well as introduces another new ninja midway through the first season, Wildfire. The show has done a wonderful job at showcasing struggles with issues that we face in real life. Sora struggles with her identity, not feeling accepted by her family and running away from home. Eren struggles with not feeling good enough. All of these storylines are extremely impactful to a lot of people and to me as well. But today I want to talk about a storyline from season 2 of the show involving Lloyd. The season starts with Lloyd experiencing visions due to implications from the first season. The visions cause him to experience extreme stress and anxiety, which leads to insomnia. The first episode shows him struggling to sleep, avoiding sleep as much as possible. When he does sleep, he wakes up in a frantic state. The other ninja notice that he is not sleeping and express their concerns for him. He explains that he can't sleep because the visions he is getting are so terrifying to him. Lloyd's visions can be compared to the thoughts that people with anxiety experience. As someone with generalized anxiety, it always feels like I'm in a constant state of panic, worrying about the future. Due to my anxiety, I have experienced insomnia, especially over the last few months. Either I try to stay up as long as possible so I can avoid sleeping, or my mind gets so overrun with worried thoughts that I can't fall asleep. When I watched this episode, I felt so seen by Lloyd's struggles. Seeing one of my favorite characters experience something I feel as well made me feel like I was understood in some capacity. I genuinely teared up the first time I watched this episode because Lloyd is a character that has always been extremely close to my heart, and I felt so seen by what he was experiencing in this episode. What makes this representation even better is that his anxiety is not completely ignored after this episode. It is a long-standing, well-developed arc that lasts throughout the entire season and will presumably continue to the 3rd season. As the season progresses, Lloyd's visions continue to riddle him with anxiety, messing with his focus and confidence. He becomes more and more uneasy as he has no idea how to deal with his visions and their subsequent anxiety. Lloyd's anxiety is depicted through anxiety attacks showing symptoms such as shortness of breath, trembling, and feeling faint. These are very real symptoms of anxiety attacks. They are accurately and effectively portrayed through Lloyd. This scene from episode 7 of season 2 is one of my favorite scenes of the entire series.
So you're afraid these visions are holding you back from progressing with your Rising Dragon training?
I'm just a bundle of nerves, stumbling around in a daze. I'm even afraid to rest because more visions might come.
Why would that be a bad thing?
Because they're terrifying. I see evil things. My friend's in danger. It's awful.
I'm sure it is. But these visions are also important warnings, right?
They are, but they're also tearing me apart. Master Wu taught that when there is no calm outside of you, you must find the calm inside. But I have no calm inside of me anymore.
You held the power of a source dragon, something no mortal was ever meant to do. These possible futures are after effects.
Possible futures?
Source dragons experience time differently than the rest of us. They can see what came before and the things that might come to be. These visions you're having are like a fragment of that.
But how can I stop them?
You can't. You can never force the motion of the universe to bend to your will. You can only find your place within its current. But with careful meditation, it's possible you can find harmony with these visions, so you no longer have to live in fear of them.
No, I need to stop them, because when they come on, I can't...
Rontu explains that Oi's visions cannot be stopped, but he has to find a way to be at peace with them and manage them so he can be a little less troubled. This is very similar to how anxiety works. Unfortunately, when you have an anxiety disorder, it will probably never completely go away. You can't stop it and never have it again, it just doesn't work like that. But there are ways that you can manage anxiety and find ways to be at peace with it, even if it is still around. I have found that things like therapy, being in nature, and journaling have been very helpful in helping me manage my anxiety. Even though it is still there and troubling, I have found ways to help me feel a little less troubled when constantly living with it. Rontu suggests meditation to Lloyd, which I also think is very helpful. This scene is perhaps the most important scene in Lloyd's anxiety arc, as it shows the troubles Lloyd has and doesn't discredit how terrifying and hurtful they are to his psyche. But instead, it explains that even though his anxiety is hurtful to him, it is there because in some ways it is trying to protect him and can ultimately be managed in some ways. This scene actually helped me to understand and grasp how I could manage my own anxiety. As the season continues, Lloyd starts to find more peace with his visions and anxiety. Although his visions are so troubling to him and hurtful, he finds more peace with it. This is not only an incredible representation of anxiety, but a great teaching mechanism for children. As a children's show, it is amazing that the writers are showcasing mental health issues like anxiety so that children can learn about them and have coping techniques taught to them early on so they can understand how to deal with it effectively in the future, or how to recognize and empathize with others who experience anxiety. Dragon's Rising is an overall incredible piece of media in all aspects, and they really excelled at teaching about anxiety and representing the reality of anxiety on screen. The second show I want to talk about is another LEGO show. LEGO is really killing it with the anxiety representation, huh? The show LEGO Monkie Kid is another of my favorite shows. The show is inspired by the novel Journey to the West. It focuses on a core group of characters modeled after the core group of characters from Journey to the West. First, there's the main character, MK, who is the Monkey King's successor. The show starts by him inheriting Monkey King's powers when he finds his staff. Monkey King is also part of the show, but doesn't become like a central main character until like season 3, arguably season 2. The other characters are Mei, Sandy, Pigsy, and Tang, who are raced on the white dragon horse Sha Wu Jing, Zhu Bajie, and Tong Zhang Zhang. I am not Chinese, please correct me if I mispronounced any of those, I'm so sorry. The show follows their adventures fighting villains based on characters from Journey to the West. The show is set in a modern Chinese city and is beautifully animated. At least seasons 1 to 4 are. The characters are well defined and extremely likable. The first 2 seasons do not focus much on emotional topics, but they do focus on topics like that in slight bursts. They handle topics like MK grappling with not feeling good enough to be the Monkey King's successor, and Mei not feeling like she belongs in her family. The most focus they place on issues like anxiety in the earlier seasons is in one of my personal favorite episodes, Season 1, Episode 7, Impossible Delivery. Even though this is one of my favorite episodes, this is not the one I want to focus on for today. I want to focus on the most recent season of Monkie Kid, Season 5. Season 5 was interesting, to say the least. I'm not going to touch on it for too long in this video, but there was a lot of discourse amongst the fandom over the show switching animation studios for this season, because when the trailer was released, the animation was noticeably subpar compared to the previous seasons. Monkie Kid has always been adored for its stunning animation, so this noticeable drop in quality was disheartening, to say the least. Although, despite the drop in animation quality, the writing and characterization continued to be incredible. They continue to explore characters more deeply, and the emotional storylines have continued to just get better and better. Season 5 was probably the most emotional season so far. I think most fans would agree with me on that. The previous season had revealed that MK was actually a monkey/human superhero guy. It's hard to explain, but basically he's the same kind of creature as the Monkey King and Macaque, except he can look like a human, and you get the idea. MK was not aware of this previously, and now that he has found out, he is struggling with it. In the first episode of Season 5, we first see MK looking extremely tired. He is training with Monkey King, and they briefly discuss how MK could tap into his full powers if he embraced his monkey side. MK doesn't want to talk about it. Monkey King asks him if he's sleeping okay, and MK insists that he's fine, telling Monkey King that he has to keep moving forward. Monkey King tries to tell him that it's okay to take a minute, but MK quickly changes the subject. As the episode progresses, we continue to see a very tired MK pushing himself to the limit, delivering noodles and helping Pigsy clean his restaurant. Pigsy asks MK if he has been sleeping, and MK finally admits that he hasn't been able to sleep because of his anxious thoughts surrounding his monkey form. I find it interesting that both Dragons Rising and Monkie Kid have explored anxiety through insomnia, but it is a good representation and probably more easier for younger audiences to visually understand. Pigsy decides to distract MK's mind more, and eventually MK calms down enough that he falls asleep. As MK sleeps, his anxious thoughts cause him to have nightmares. MK's way of dealing with his anxious thoughts is avoiding confronting them by keeping himself distracted and keeping himself awake, so he won't have anxiety-filled nightmares. This is definitely not a healthy way of dealing with anxiety and something that I am very guilty of. His anxiety isn't touched on again that much until episode 4. In episode 4, Sandy notices that MK is unhealthily dealing with his anxious thoughts and tries to help him by encouraging him to meditate. MK tries to meditate, but as soon as he starts to think about his monkey form, he panics and immediately jumps up. As the episode progresses, MK has to overcome a trial to get the next item that can save the world. The trial involves meditation. Who could have seen that coming? MK must try to calm his thoughts. As he starts to meditate, his anxious thoughts begin to flood his mind. He doesn't know how to deal with them and begins to panic again. Sandy, in perilous danger, I forgot to add, encourages MK not to give up and that he can do it. Sandy then delivers a line that reminds me of Inside Out 2.
The only one who can control you is you!
In Inside Out 2, spoilers I guess, the emotions learn that one emotion does not define Riley. Only Riley can define who she is and control who she is. Taking this advice, MK tries again. As he meditates, he now feels a little stronger.
You're just a part of who I am. Rage, fear, desperation. Yes! Every time I've needed to fight to save the people I care about, I've been angry, scared, desperate. If I hadn't been, I couldn't have saved anyone. You're me. But I'm in control. You think you can just give yourself a little pep talk and make this fear go away? No, but I'm gonna work at it every day, and I'm gonna be here now.
MK admits that he cannot make his anxious thoughts go away entirely, but that he will keep working at it. He will keep trying to be present and not dwell so much on those thoughts. This is really the pinnacle of MK's anxiety arc. It's a great lesson to teach that anxiety cannot be stopped completely, but rather you must learn how to deal with it, so that you can lessen its impact on you. I think Monkey Kid excelled at demonstrating anxiety and showing it through the main character MK is very important, showing that anybody can deal with anxiety, even people you assume have it together. Especially since MK was typically shown as very energetic and happy and confident in the first few seasons, it's interesting to show that he can also have problems too, because it's true in real life. Although it was not the main arc for his character this season, it was still well handled and very impactful. I think Dragons Rising handled it a little better, but both arcs were different in terms of length and impact on the overall plot, as well as other factors, so Monkey Kid did very well for the logistics of the show. I also think it's important to note that Dragons Rising has a runtime of 22 minutes per episode, while Monkey Kid only has a runtime of 11 minutes per episode, which means Dragons Rising has a lot more time to work with for developing arcs and exploring multiple characters' arcs. Monkey Kid does very well within the show's limits and capabilities. Anyway, it's time to move on to the final show I'll be talking about today. This is a show from the distant past. It's My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. My Little Pony was my childhood. This show and the MLPG3 era were everything to me, and they still are. When I was in like 7th or 8th grade, I felt pressured to stop liking the show and My Little Pony in general, and unfortunately I gave most of my ponies and stuff away, which I'm still so mad at myself about. Anyway, in the past 2 years, I rewatched the show, and I have once again become so obsessed with it. Friendship is Magic follows the main character, Twilight Sparkle, in her journey to learn about friendship by meeting and becoming friends with other main characters, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy. When I was younger, my favorites were Twilight Sparkle, Pinkie Pie, and Rarity. I still loved Fluttershy when I was little, but I was more drawn to Rarity's fashion, Pinkie's goofiness, and the personality of Twilight, who I saw myself in. But as I've revisited the show in my 20s, Fluttershy has quickly risen in the ranks of my favorites. Her episodes are some of my favorites, and I find that she is a very underrated character in the MLP fandom. I rarely ever see anyone mention her as their favorite. I think that's because she is very misunderstood by the fandom. Friendship is Magic premiered in 2010, a time when mental health wasn't largely discussed in media or society in general. Fluttershy was labeled as the shy character. She was just quiet in most people's eyes, and in that context she wasn't as interesting to most fans. When I was growing up, I was shy, but I didn't have social anxiety yet. There is a difference between the two that I don't think most people understand. Being shy is being more reserved and timid around people. Having social anxiety is being constantly scared to talk to people and overthinking every interaction you have before, during, and after. Obviously, these concepts are more nuanced, but that is the basic gist of it. I think that Fluttershy as a character is both shy and has social anxiety. She is a very timid character and gets nervous talking to others. She only opens up to Twilight in the first episode when she spots Spike the Dragon, since she loves animals. In future episodes, Fluttershy gets very nervous when talking to other characters, specifically in episodes like Putting Your Hoof Down from Season 2. She overthinks the possibility of putting herself out there. For example, in Philly Vanilli from Season 4, she thinks about how she will be perceived if she performs with Rarity's musical group. Overthinking social scenarios is a big part of social anxiety. I think of this situation much like how I feel now, presenting films and media projects I'm working on in university in front of my peers. I overthink every possible outcome and overthink how dumb I'll probably look, and I get extremely anxious over the thought of presenting before, during, and after. The interesting thing about this show, in the context of this video, is that I don't think the writers necessarily understood that Fluttershy's character was blending the lines between just being a shy character and exhibiting traits of social anxiety. When I was rewatching the show, I noticed these similarities between myself and Fluttershy, and recognized that her character was representing social anxiety in a very subtle way. One of the best examples of this is in the Season 2 episode Hurricane Fluttershy. In this episode, the Pegasi and Ponyville have to create a tornado in order to bring water up into the air to Cloudsdale. The flying ability of every Pegasi is being tested to make sure they can generate enough wind power to keep the tornado going long enough. Fluttershy is very self-conscious of her flying abilities and does not want to showcase her flying ability in front of everyone else, in fear of them making fun of her. She tries to avoid it, which reminds me a lot of how I try to avoid social interactions because I'm too afraid of how people will judge me. Rainbow Dash eventually gets Fluttershy to participate, and then this scene happens.
Fluttershy, your turn!
Tell her.
No, you tell her.
No, you.
Great job, Fluttershy. You measured, 0.5.
0.5? Isn't that like lesson 1?
Ow!
Fluttershy notices the ponies laughing and assumes that they are laughing at her and are going to make fun of her for her flying ability, like Phillies had done to her in the past. That's when she gets more nervous and frightened, and it's so on par with the experience of having social anxiety. Everything in this scene screams more than just being shy. Fluttershy is noticing the behavior of the other characters, and it is making her more anxious in a public social situation that she was already dreading. Due to her past experiences in social situations like this, her anticipation of this event is causing her to be more nervous and garner anxiety over how others may judge her. She shows physical signs of anxiety through shaking legs, quick breaths, and tears. Despite experiencing an anxiety attack, Fluttershy pushes herself to train as much as she can.
That has to be some kind of mistake. I worked so hard.
Fluttershy, that's a huge improvement. You did awesome, Fluttershy.
No, I didn't. I thought I'd gotten over my nerves, but they still got the best of me. There's no way I'll fly with 10.0 wing power tomorrow.
So you won't fly with 10.0 wing power. Every bit counts.
How would you feel if every pony else was flying with 10.0 wing power and you were flying with 2.5?
Actually, it was only 2.3 and... Ow! Well, I'd feel...
Exactly! Humiliated! I'm sorry, Rainbow Dash. I just can't do it.
Fluttershy's anticipation of future events causes her to be anxious. She feels like she'll be judged and therefore will be humiliated. When I rewatched this scene for the first time in years, I recognized a similar trait between myself and Fluttershy. When Fluttershy said I worked so hard and I still couldn't do it, it reminded me of how every time I'm facing any social interaction, I try so hard to be a little less anxious and a little more confident, and no matter how much I try, every time is still so anxiety-ridden and difficult. It never feels like I am making any progress and is very frustrating. I felt very seen by this scene. At the end of the episode, Fluttershy shows up to the tornado and sees that they need more wind power. She still feels too anxious, but Twilight tells her not to do it for anyone else but to do it for herself. Twilight encourages Fluttershy to make this step without considering anyone else's expectations but her own. I think that can also be a very helpful step in trying to face social anxiety. Instead of considering what other people will think about you when facing a social interaction, you can try and simply focus on making sure you feel some sort of progress in facing your fears. Or just meet your own expectations. Try to just focus on being as comfortable as possible in how you interact and present yourself. Don't worry about how others could judge the way you stumble over your words or twist your hair when you're talking. Just focus on whether you feel like you're being yourself or not. Even if Fluttershy was never meant to showcase social anxiety, I think that her characterization can be related to it and can also be an excellent representation for people with social anxiety. I know her character has been very relatable and feels very representative for me. These 3 shows have showcased anxiety and social anxiety in a great and effective way. I've seen myself represented through these shows and felt a little more understood knowing that other people recognize these mental health issues and are addressing them effectively. I think this representation is important, especially in children's media. While animation is not purely for children, all of the shows I talked about today are written for a young audience. Teaching children about anxiety early, through media that already teaches them life lessons, will help them identify ways to deal with these issues earlier on in life. This can help them as they grow up if they face these issues themselves or if they know someone who deals with anxiety. Young people can also deal with anxiety as well, and this could help them feel seen. For adults, I think these shows and movies mentioned in the tweet I showed earlier can also be great representation for us. I know it has been for me. Also, animation is doing much more at addressing anxiety than live action is, for sure. I can't think of many live action shows or movies other than Iron Man 3 that actually address anxiety well. I think people need to realize that mental health is something that many people deal with every day and that people often feel alone because it is so stigmatized. Although you may think mental health has been better addressed in recent years, it's only because you're chronically online, like me. Even though it is talked about much more in society nowadays, it is still heavily stigmatized and many people do not understand how mental health issues can really affect someone. I've had to explain to many people what social anxiety is, and every time they ask me, isn't that just normal anxiety? No, there's a difference. I try not to get too frustrated at other people's misunderstandings of it, but it can be disheartening when you feel so misunderstood. Anxiety deserves to be represented in media. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I hope this representation continues to be explored. It's very meaningful and is making a difference for people even if it's small. Perhaps the next time someone asks me what social anxiety is, I'll show them Hurricane Fluttershy.